first session today, we have a presentation on Sri Aurobindo, Change and Constant by Ranjan Mitter, Secretary, Sri Aurobindo Institute of Culture, West Bengal.
Everybody since yesterday morning has either said Vanakkam or Namaste. I'll start with the very Bengali Namaskar. Ones who are Bengali and those who understand Bengali will probably get the import of what I'm saying. But more importantly, the word Namaskar resonates for a very different reason. If you are a fan of Tagore, or even if you happen to know Tagore somewhat, and the festival director put up a slide on Tagore yesterday of his poems, and you would know that Tagore wrote a very famous piece on Sri Aurobindo. And that finds a place in his selected poems called Sanchoita. And the name of that poem is Namaskar. So in that same vein, I salute you with the deeper meaning of what Tagore intended when he offered his salutations to Sri Aurobindo. Before I start today and to speak on the topic, I want to offer a few caveats. The first being that Sri Aurobindo believed, and rightly so, that his life was not on the surface for men to see. And yet today we are going to try to scan trends from his life very, very impertinently. And it's not possible, so therefore I seek his pardon. The second thing is that we speak about somebody who's not just a photograph, who's not just etched in history, who is not just in statues, but very, very living amongst all of us. The mother said very aptly, after he passed away, that Sri Aurobindo is constantly there and accessible to those who wish to see and hear him. So we are talking of somebody who's very present amongst us today. The third point I wish to make to you is what I just said in the second point about his omnipresence is even more marked in this town of Pondicherry. When the mother came to meet Sri Aurobindo, she says, I felt him, I felt his atmosphere 10 nautical miles away. And she emphasized on the word miles, not kilometers, she said, to add a dimension of gravity. So therefore, this is a place where I speak which carries his breath, very much so. We are just a few, maybe a kilometer away from Sri Aurobindo's Samadhi, where his living presence continues to be enshrined and inspires the thousands of people who come there regularly, each hour, each day, every day. So once again, after having offered all these caveats, Namaskar, and let's begin. And let me talk about the proposition. The proposition is Sri Aurobindo, change and constant. You see, when the organizers spoke to me and they talked about something which resonated, and I'll tell you why it resonated. And I'll now come to the reason why I started with Namaskar. You see, I am Bengali, okay? And Sri Aurobindo too was Bengali. But that's where the similarity ends, but never mind. All right? So, if you are in Bengal, there is one theme that has been running since April 1910 in Bengal. It's a recurrent theme. You talk to any political leader, you talk to any layman, you talk to anybody, they will tell you that Sri Aurobindo should not have left Bengal. All right? They believe that he should have been there leading the Indian freedom movement right from the front, the way he led it. And his presence was sorely missed. At best, when people appealed to him to come back and take on the mantle as president of the Indian National Congress repeatedly in the 20s, he should have responded. Now, this lament continues. This lament is not new. It resonates even today in every speech that a Bengali leader makes in Bengal. This lament continues. It's one of those traditional laments. It's kind of etched in stone. But it goes as far back as Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, an iconic Indian national leader who virtually felt the same way. Much as he respected and revered Sri Aurobindo, he continued to feel that Sri Aurobindo's presence would have made a great difference to India's calendar of freedom. Anyway, so the point is that we are talking of somebody in Bengal who has been regarded as a revolutionary. When I was a kid, and there are many kids in the audience today, there used to be a book by a gentleman called Shailesh De in Bengali, very famous book, sold thousands of copies in those days. It was called Ami Subhash Bolchi. Now, in the preface of this book, Ami Subhash Bolchi, were a set of photographs. The photographs were of iconic national leaders, of Netaji Subhash on his various expeditions, when he crossed Russia, when he crossed Afghanistan, when he left, the car he left from Elgin Road, etc., etc. But right in the beginning, there was a photograph of Sri Aurobindo, and it said Biplab Guru below it. So Bengal also regards him as the kind of forerunner and the most important figure of Indian nationalism. So this is the issue. That is the change that Bengal hasn't been able to accept. The Indian revolutionary who turned Rishi. So therefore, very aptly, probably the organizers thought that a Bengali from that part of the country will be able to share this angst, this pain, and probably share that Sri Aurobindo perhaps continued to do what he was supposed to do. All right? So, the photograph you see here, was of somebody who did not write Sri Aurobindo with an A-U-R-O. He was basically named Aravinda, as in A-R-A-V-I-N-D-A, Acroyd Ghosh, spelled with an S-E. Okay? And his father, at the tender age of 5, first of all, he was born in 1872, August 15th, which you all know. He was born in the house of a friend of his father, Dr. Krishnadon Ghosh. Why a father's friend? Because his father was a civil surgeon posted in East Bengal, now Bangladesh, and was attending to an epidemic. So obviously that was not where his wife could have given birth to Sri Aurobindo. And therefore it was in Calcutta, in a friend's house, Monomohan Ghosh's house, not to be confused with his elder brother, that Sri Aurobindo was born in the wee dawn of 15th August 1872. And you will notice that he had a middle name which sounded very English. Dr. K.D. Ghosh was an Anglophile, if that's the correct way to describe him. He had received his medical degree from Aberdeen in Scotland, and he was professedly, avowedly somebody who saw the merits of the British Raj and credited the fact that that was the best thing that could have happened to Bengal and to India. And therefore, the name, the Acroyd epithet in the middle, therefore, at the instance of a friend of his, or rather with the collaboration of a friend of his, an English friend, who was his, who was in the same town as him, working in the same town, and his name was Edward Glazier. Edward Glazier happened to know a family of a clergyman in England, the Druids. And that's where, after a 2-year stint, from the age of 5 1957 in Loreto Convent, Darjeeling, he was sent. And the Druids brought him up and taught him the Bible. The Druids taught him the classics and the classical languages. He went to St. Paul's and then to King's College, Cambridge. When he went to King's College, you see, there's, I think, if I'm not wrong on the name of the gentleman, the name of the gentleman was perhaps Wilkinson, and it's in the annals of King's College, those who went to King's, when he wrote about Sri Aurobindo later, he described him as a person who had great knowledge of the classics, of languages, was absolutely brilliant, more than an Englishman, and that mattered in that time. And, of course, somebody who didn't, because of a writing test, didn't qualify for the ICS. He makes a mention for that. And he says that and he doesn't go much further. He goes up to Baroda, and he says his life was marked with abrupt changes. Mark the word change, all right? So that is the way he was described. The instructions that Dr. K.D. Ghosh had given to the Druids and to others was that these people, these young brothers, the three of them, Binoy Bhushan, Monomohan and Aurobindo, should not be in touch with anything remotely Hindustani. No culture, no language, no exposure. That was it, full stop. Now, did it produce the desired result? We will see as we know the answer, but still. Sri Aurobindo scored brilliantly, both in St. Paul's, winning Bedford and Butterworth and Bedford prizes, and many others, and also in the classical tripos in Cambridge, but didn't deliberately sit for the writing test. There is a lot of correspondence, as you know, about the writing test, that Sri Aurobindo probably could have gained some kind of exoneration, but he didn't pursue it assiduously, and therefore he got disqualified. People say that his father's heart sank at the prospect, but nevertheless, Sri Aurobindo decided to make an independent, that is the first time he made an independent decision. And that decision was to come back to India. What prompted that decision and what prompted this change of heart? That his father wanted him to become an enlightened ICS officer, but he didn't agree. The story again goes back to Cambridge, where he founded a secret society, was a part of it, called Lotus and Dagger. And even before going to Cambridge, his father, K.D. Ghosh, had started sending him newspaper clippings from the Bengali and other newspapers, which described English repression. So actually, the change of heart of Sri Aurobindo could be attributed in large measure, at that point in time at least, to K.D. Ghosh. What had really happened? What is not very widely known among admirers of Sri Aurobindo is that although K.D. Ghosh was an Anglophile, let me just briefly sketch the background. They came from a village close to Calcutta, now a town called Konnagar. But when he went abroad for his medical studies to Aberdeen, he was, he had crossed the Kalapani. So he was expelled from the community. All right? In response, K.D. Ghosh, the fiery guy, because then you can see where the traits come from in the genes, shed all inhibitions, said that he didn't believe in Indianness, Bengaliness, the Indian community and society, turned Brahmo, followed the Adi Brahmo Samaj, all right, and then married a Brahmo. Yesterday, his father-in-law's picture was up, on the stage. Rishi Rajnarayan Bose. Mark the word Rishi, all right? And then basically took up work in East Bengal. Now, very interestingly, this is again something that everybody might not know. Sri Aurobindo's maternal grandfather, K.D. Ghosh's father-in-law, Rishi Rajnarayan Bose, was a person of that time who, unlike others, not only was discussing widow remarriage and girl child's education and things like that. He was a great friend of David Hare, who had set up a teacher training college, which still exists today. But he made a distinction between the good British and the not so good British. All right? And basically was the first person to talk very openly at that time about national education. That's a theme that Sri Aurobindo would develop much, much later and carry that forward, and we are still discussing it 75 years after India's independence. But the seed was Rishi Rajnarayan Bose. So when he was talking about in his essays, he talks about these not so good British, which were actually spoiling the name of the British, all right? And the fact that Kalapani, he was also talking about Kalapani, probably about, and how it was wrong of the Indian community to expel such people when they needed that education. So all these things that happened to his son-in-law are actually aptly described by Rishi Rajnarayan Bose. Very interesting, all these little anecdotes. So what happened was now to Dr. K.D. Ghosh, in spite of his brilliant work, which still keeps him etched in the memory of people of East Bengal. In what way, let me tell you. Khulna, which is the main city of East Bengal, in Khulna, if you go, in India, what is the main road? In Pondicherry, it's MG Road. You know that. It's a no-brainer. If you go to East Bengal, the principal street is Dr. K.D. Ghosh Road. All right? The municipality building belonged to, that area belonged to Dr. K.D. Ghosh. That was where he resided. And he was like the chairman of the municipal corporation at that point in time, thanks to his work on eradicating epidemics. The same way, because he basically arranged to dig up a sewage canal in Rangpur and eradicate epidemics there, the canal that cuts through the city in Rangpur is called the KD Canal. Despite all this work of serving humanity, and K.D. Ghosh, basically the other thing he did very quickly was that, in spite of sending his children to England, he donated so much of his salary to everybody, whoever in need. So Sri Aurobindo and his brothers often went without food, just perhaps with a loaf of bread, which they had to stretch for days. All right, so again something. So K.D. Ghosh found out, much to his pain, that the British were actually jealous of him. And in a few years that he was there, or in the number of years in East Bengal, he kept getting continuously transferred. When he understood this, he was disillusioned and started sending his son these articles from the Bengali. The effect that it had was it permanently oriented Sri Aurobindo's mind differently. He didn't speak a word of any Indian language, not in touch with Indian culture, but he got firmly oriented on the path of Indian nationalism, rejected the ICS, took the first decision, befriended or accosted rather Maharaja Sayaji Rao Gaikwad in Baroda, and then came over with him in the administrative service and then also in the educational service, rising to become the vice principal of the Baroda College, now the MS University. 1893, if I'm not wrong, February 6, Sri Aurobindo arrives in Bombay, today Mumbai. And this is how it looked like. Pondicherry's pier has changed, so has Bombay's. What happened to him? He sensed, he says, a vast calm descending on him. He speaks directly of what we would call a spiritual experience. All right? So this is not just a man who was organizing rebellion. This was a man who had concrete spiritual experiences before even having been ordained into any kind of spiritual practice, because he had no exposure to it. So that vast calm descended on him, continued through his lifetime, and continues today. You go to the Matri Mandir, you go to the Samadhi, what you feel is this tremendous atmosphere, this vast calm that continued through his lifetime was his hallmark, continues to inspire people. That silence, that calm descended on him in Apollo Bandar, never to leave him. This is his consort, his wife, Mrilanini Devi. They got married in 1902. Again, a significant change in Sri Aurobindo's life. I told you that rebelling against the established order, K.D. Ghosh became a follower of the Brahmo Samaj. Started by somebody whose picture was up on the screen yesterday, Raja Ram Mohan Roy. So I think I'm connecting, right? So, but when Sri Aurobindo decided to marry, he married somebody who was a Brahmo, mind you, all right? Mrinalini Devi. Father Rishi Rajnarayan Bose, somebody very close to Maharishi Debendranath Thakur, father of Rabindranath Tagore, and Rishi Rajnarayan Bose, interestingly, is mentioned many times in Tagore's Jivan Shriti, the account of his childhood, the reminiscences of his childhood. A very witty, humorous guy, old man. That's how Rishi Rajnarayan Bose was described. And Tagore was a very young boy, disillusioned with conventional education, moving out of Oriental seminary, trying to study on his own, etc., etc., and encouraged by Rishi Rajnarayan Bose. But Sri Aurobindo married this Brahmo girl as per his own wish, as per Hindu rites. It's fundamental difference. Even today in Kolkata, you have the Adi Brahmo Samaj and the further reformed one, the Shadharan Brahmo Samaj. They have their own way of marriages. Sri Aurobindo deliberately decided at this point, I'll marry a Brahmo girl, but this is it. Oh, sorry, I'm making a mistake. She was a Hindu girl. Very sorry. She was a Hindu girl, daughter of Bhupal Bose. All right, but Sri Aurobindo put out an advertisement asking for the marriage and specifying the marriage had to be as per Hindu rites. Sorry for the momentary confusion. So this is a letter in Sri Aurobindo's Bengali handwriting. It's a pity that you can't probably make much of it. But I'll just tell you very briefly that he hired somebody called Dinendra Kumar Roy, who's written a book later on, Aurobindo Prashango, and he invited Dinendra Kumar Roy to coach him in Bengali in Baroda. All right? Dinendra Kumar Roy first records, and this is something you would know, his deepest surprise at accosting this person. He talks of his dark complexion, talks of the marks of pox on his face, talks of his slender frame, talks of the almost, absence of furniture in the house he lived in, and the frugality of his lifestyle. And he says, could this be Aurobindo Ghosh, the Cambridge-educated man who virtually was so brilliant than all his peers, somebody who is in the service of the Maharaj of Baroda in a very handsome position? He was really taken aback. All right? So, now Mrinalini he gets married to, and probably like a very atypical husband, writes to her about three madnesses. Any wife would have been seriously, disturbed by such a letter. We know that Mrinalini bore the brunt of everything and eventually tried to come to Pondicherry much later, and that did not happen, succeed, etc., etc. In these three madnesses, you see in the third one, it says the third madness is this: whereas others regard the country as an inert piece of matter and know it as the plains, the fields, the forests, the mountains and the rivers, I know my country as the mother. I worship her and adore her. This is a defining statement from Sri Aurobindo, and we will come back to it again and again. All right? This is, you see, in this same letter, he says, in the next paragraph, and he talks about two concepts: Kshatra Teja, the Teja of a Kshatriya, and Brahma Teja, the Teja that comes from knowledge, from deep inner spiritual knowledge. And he says, I do not have physical strength. I'm not going to war with sword or gun, but with the power of knowledge. So this conscious understanding also was that he wanted to put, the two statements that come out very profoundly is, that one is that he wanted to fight the British with Brahma Teja, an organized Indian nationalism around Brahma Teja. The other thing that comes out very powerfully is that, he was somebody who was already training Jyotin Banerjee and others in revolutionary activity in Baroda, and things like that were happening, all right? And basically, this is what would eventually galvanize the Indian nation. In Baroda, again, the further seed of the Rishi was born. For the first time, Sri Aurobindo invited somebody to his house called a ascetic by the name of, or rather I shouldn't say ascetic, a sadhu by the name of Vishnu Bhaskar Lele. And Vishnu Bhaskar Lele would have taken him through several ordainments, through several practices. But much to his surprise, Sri Aurobindo attained the experience of the silent Brahman within a matter of days. It so surprised Vishnu Bhaskar Lele. Later on, Sri Aurobindo basically says that that's the moment he understood that he did not have the need of a human guru. And that is what he continued, in that strain throughout his life. So, a little help for a very brief time in spiritual practices. Maybe you can consider it in today's parlance a workshop, and then it's over. The need for the guru is over. In 1905, 1906, there was something very interesting that happened in Calcutta. And I'll describe the incident to you graphically. There is this palatial mansion in a place called Wellesley Square. And in that palatial mansion, an elderly lady was sitting on the balcony combing her hair, all right, in the evening. Her son had gone out, and suddenly she heard loud cries from the area nearby. And she was fearful. She inquired, "Where is my son?" She was told the son had gone out. So this son's name was Subodh Chandra Mollik, S.C. Mollik. And very soon thereafter, she heard the noise getting louder and louder. That means the crowd was approaching the house. And in their hand they held torches, mashals. So she was very scared that this crowd is coming maybe to attack this mansion. They were a very rich family, the Molliks. And the Molliks even today are a very, very rich, family in Bengal. Anyway, then she heard something more. She heard a shout, "Raja, Raja, Raja." What had happened that evening was, in a place called Patir Mat, Subodh Chandra Mollik had announced a grant of rupees 1 lakh, a very, very princely sum in those days, for setting up a center for national education, later to be called the Bengal National College, right? And he made one major condition, and that condition was that Aurobindo Ghosh had to be invited and had to agree to come as the founder principal of this national college. This is the building on the left where he came in 1906. This is the building on the right where he took his farewell address in 1907, when he started with the Vande Mataram. So it's a very momentous period. Remember back what I just told you, Rishi Naran Bose, national education. Sri Aurobindo now was formally tasked himself with building an agenda for national education. That still forms the base of any attempt at national education that India has attempted in the last 75 years. What is not known enough in India is that Sri Aurobindo did not just set up one national college, or rather be involved in one national college. Sri Aurobindo toured all of Bengal and other places as well, setting up national schools. These are national schools in Bangladesh, right? This one is in Jhalokati, right? If you have read Sri Aurobindo's Jhalokati speech, this is where it was, all right? And this is where he set up a national school. And basically he set up something more. Sorry. No, sorry. So we've said Jhalokati, but he also set up one in Borishal. And what he set up in Borishal is called Brojomohon Vidyalaya. He set up in collaboration with this gentleman, who was also revolutionary. His name is Ashwini Kumar Datta. And Ashwini Kumar Datta, you see him in this picture, together with Lokmanya Tilak and others. All right? So, sorry? Pointer. The pointer, this is Ashwini, I don't see the red coming. So this is Ashwini Kumar Datta, on the right, seated. And Lokmanya Tilak is on the left of Sri Aurobindo. A very famous photograph. So this school, the national school in Borishal, is in the name of Ashwini Kumar Datta's father, Brojomohon. So the school still stands today, Brojomohon Vidyalaya. Interestingly, both these schools today have inscriptions with the story of Sri Aurobindo, the way the national schools were set up, etc., etc. All right? So this again, Sri Aurobindo used his education to tremendous measure and basically set up the agenda for national education. All right? Now, why did he leave the National College? That again, very, very abruptly, in a year and a half, Sri Aurobindo was in and out. Because Bipin Pal had gone to jail, and Bipin Pal requested for help in editing the Bande Mataram, which is a newspaper he had set up. Mind you, a lot of Sri Aurobindo's things in life, including the fact that India was born on his birthday, were things that were not outwardly planned by him, but were things that happened fortuitously or by divine sanction. So basically he starts writing for the Bande Mataram, and again I go back to Alo's presentation yesterday, Rishi Bankim Chandra, and Sri Aurobindo defining Bankim Chandra as a Rishi. And there was a line yesterday on the stage, you might have seen, the mantra had been given. That mantra, which Alo talked about yesterday, that is the name of this weekly Bande Mataram. And using Bande Mataram, very quickly, Sri Aurobindo galvanized the nation with that clarion cry. All right? So we go forward, and I now want to draw your attention to the picture on the left. It's a warrant of arrest. This warrant of arrest, you can't make out, is not dated when Sri Aurobindo actually went to jail. This is the warrant of arrest that was served to him when for writing allegedly seditious articles in the Bande Mataram. Right? However, and the immediate effect was what? That you can imagine what kind of a leader he was. Pattabhi Sitaramaya has described him as a meteor who shone like a star in the firmament. And here, the moment the word spread, imagine there was no, it hadn't even come out in the newspaper. The fact that the English were going to arrest him, that news spread like wildfire. And even today, Bolpur is a 3-hour drive, 3 to 4 to 5 hour drive from Calcutta. It reached Tagore in Bolpur. And he wrote that famous poem which I started my little piece with, called Namaskar, there, and came running. You know, not running, but in a vehicle all the way to Calcutta, you know, in a very anxious state of mind. Met him where? In Raja Subodh Mallik's house. All right? And said, you know, gasping, panting, Moshai khub to phaki dilen. The word means you kind of, you know, you are still out there, and, you know, basically you are not in prison. And Sri Aurobindo very, very calmly, not smiling, said, not for long. Very prophetic statement, all right? So this is that poem Namaskar, which was then published letter in verse. And this is then Sri Aurobindo at the end of that story, at the instance of, Khudiram Bose, Prafullo Chaki throwing the bomb, thinking it was Kingsford in Muzaffarpur, and then the beginning of the Alipore bomb trial. So this is the first prison record, which you all have seen. So now I come to the presidency jail, and let me see if I can draw upon something and quickly tell you this little story. If I can't, you'll just have to bear with me, because so this is the part I looked at the jail that secluded me from men, and it was no longer by its high walls that I was imprisoned. No, it was Vasudeva who surrounded me. I walked under the branches of the tree in front of my cell, but it was not the tree. I knew it was Vasudeva, it was Sri Krishna, whom I saw standing there and holding over me his shade. I looked at the bars of my cell, the very grating that did duty for a door, and again I saw Vasudeva. It was Narayana who was guarding and standing sentry over me. Or I lay on the coarse blankets that were given me for a couch and felt the arms of Sri Krishna around me, the arms of my friend and lover. I looked at the prisoners in the jail, the thieves, the murderers, the swindlers, and as I looked at them, I saw Vasudeva. It was Narayana whom I found in these darkened souls and misused bodies. So I would just recited this to you for a reason. It's something that's known to you, but this is held up as a symbol of the transformation of Aurobindo Akroyd Ghosh into Sri Aurobindo. I want to contend to you that Sri Aurobindo never changed from his birth. There was that constancy, there was that element of the constant in him. Maybe the articulation came now, but if you look at Apollo Bandar, if you look at Vishnu Bhaskar Lele, the experience of the silent Brahman, the fact that he would speak the way he did. By the way, he lived in a solitary cell, all right? Very, very small. Now, unfortunately, this is the cell, and this is the way it looks like today. In fact, there are many more gods and goddesses, but that's beside the point. Now I come to the fact that, the misunderstanding of Bengal and Bengalis. And this is the appeal of Chittaranjan Das, who became Deshbandhu as a result of his pleading for Sri Aurobindo. And basically he says here something that if the Bengali was a little better read, he would have understood. All right? Remember, this is at the pinnacle of his achievements. He is now coming out just before he was acquitted by the English. And Chittaranjan Das says, long after this controversy is hushed in silence, long after this turmoil, this agitation ceases, long after he is dead and gone, he will be looked upon as the poet of patriotism, as the prophet of nationalism, and the lover of humanity. Now that part is given. So that's first, that with the prophetic vision, he sees this, that long after Sri Aurobindo is dead and gone. Now see the second line. Long after he is dead and gone, his words will be echoed and re-echoed, not only in India, but across distant seas and lands. How on earth would Chittaranjan Das, in his wildest imagination, have known this? This is the question I wish to pose to you today. Short of the fact that he too had a prophetic vision of what was about to happen. All right? Look at Sri Aurobindo speaking. This is Beedon Square. Can you see the body language of the people? Sri Aurobindo says he never planned what he spoke. He just stood there and words came. All right? See the people. There's no mic, no nothing. They're almost thronging close. And, he spoke very softly. Very, very softly, very calmly, very softly, with no agitation. Look at how raptly they are listening. And remember, the language he is using is not the language they understand. He is speaking in English, and they can make neither head nor tail. He was eternally apologetic about the fact that he couldn't speak in fluent Bengali. His grandfather, again Rishi Rajnaran Bose, either believed in complete English or complete Bengali in articulation. Anyway. So, to get a clue of what Chittaranjan Das said, you have to come here to Pondicherry. He's writing for the Arya, the seminal volumes that constitute the body of his work. Wrote it in, as you know, very, very few years, but that constitutes the majority of his work. All right? And again, except for Savitri, he finished most of it in a very few years. And when we today say his voice will be echoed and re-echoed, it is these publications in the Arya, later in book form, that have reached so many corners on the world today and have inspired people and has been translated into so many languages. I come to the next change. The man who opposed the British tooth and nail, whom Morley and Minto saw as an arch enemy of British rule in India, somebody they persecuted even after he came to French Pondicherry, offered his unconditional endorsement of the proposal by Sir Stafford Cripps to offer dominion status to India. He sent even Doraiswamy as an emissary, but the Indian National Congress would have none of it, and Sri Aurobindo had believed that this would have avoided India's partition. People saw it as a betrayal of the Indian cause, as a change, but in fact, the prophetic vision today tells us, ever more so, that if we had listened to him that day, if the nation had listened to him, we would not have been on the crossroads we are today. Then, of course, this is Sri Aurobindo and his disciples. Here is Nalinikanta Gupta, Amrito, and others. Remember again that, like Ramakrishna, these are very young people, many of them from his prison days and others who came to Pondicherry little expecting the life here. And eventually some of them turned to integral yoga. Some of them didn't get there and left. But anyway, they joined him because that's the only thing they knew. So this is the constant. This gentleman was there all through. When you saw that picture of Aurobindo Ackroyd Ghosh and this picture, the essence is the same. There has been no change. So then he outlined these 5 dreams for India and humanity: free India, resurgence of Asia, spiritual gift and evolutionary step, and world union, all of which you know, I don't need to repeat. But what he saw India was as an instrument for, at best an instrument for all of this. He did not believe in freedom for the sake of freedom. And that is why he did not join Netaji in his quest in the Second World War, tying up with the Axis powers, because he could see what was the bigger danger for India and for the world. So his vision of India, of Indian nationalism, was never jingoistic. It was bordering on the international. That is what we would need today if, India is to step forward. The last bit would be the constancy. You see, if you look at Sri Aurobindo, there is Durga Stotra, which he composed in 1909, and Hymn to Durga. It's one, I don't know whether there's anything like this elsewhere. Same thing Sri Aurobindo writes in Bengali and in English, with only one change. In Durga Stotra he talks of Bengal, in Hymn to Durga he talks of India. But it's the same, essentially, it's the same message. So, and then in the Three Madness letter, you see how he talks about mother as the country. The one book that probably summarizes his entire life is the book The Mother. And when he says in its concluding paragraph, the supramental change is a thing decreed, and it is this person she refers to, the mother, who mediates between our aspiration and the divine sanction. The one person who guarantees that the world will indeed arrive somewhere in a bolder, more beautiful place, and has given the certitude and the assurance that that will happen. So the fact is that this one image of the mother is what stayed with him from the dawn of his life till today. And you know, in the God's labor, he says, I shall leave my dreams in their argent air, for in a raiment of gold and blue, there shall move on the earth, embodied and fair, the living truth of you. Translated so aptly by Nishikanto, He Konokojjalo, Shobita Boroni. Tamoshamoy, He Konokojjalo, Shobita Boroni. You know, the sun word articulated there. So, embodied and fair. And there Sri Aurobindo and the mother toil on. We are talking of somebody, of two people who are one, who actually have given their lives and more. Sri Aurobindo wrote an article, and that's the last thing I'd say, in the Vande Mataram, called The Demand of the Mother. And he says, the mother's feet are on the threshold. And there's one question the mother asks, who will live for me? Who will die for me? And then Sri Aurobindo says, and she awaits our answer. So that answer is expected of not only every person in this hall, but that answer is expected. Sri Aurobindo has thrown open the question, that the mother's feet are on the threshold. And the mother asks, who will live for me? Who will die for me? You don't have to be a yogi. You don't have to be a great intellectual. You don't have to be anything. Sri Aurobindo says, with 100 people shorn of petty egoism, that's all I need in the world. Thank you very much. I don't know whether we have time for any questions, if any, but I don't think I have finished too late. If there's anything you'd like to ask, anybody? Yes, please.
It was a fascinating lecture. I mean, truly I'm learned a lot.
I'm in great trepidation, sir. This is Pondicherry. I'm speaking to people who know much more than me.
Sure.
Yes, tell me.
So, what about the Lotus and Dagger Society? I mean, is it connected to India? What is it?
Yes, it was a secret society. It was a secret society formed in Cambridge that espoused Indian nationalism.
But who started it?
Actually, Sri Aurobindo and others. Okay. Any other question? Very quickly. No, they see me too often. They would probably.
Another one?
Yes.
What is the best book to know about Aurobindo's life?
First of all, none. Because Sri Aurobindo, as he says, my life has not been on the surface for men to see. So I would say if you just follow that blindly, there's a book of his called On Himself. All right? So it's got, I think the name has changed now in the complete works. So read about Sri Aurobindo from himself. But if you want facts and figures and dates, then there are so many books. Srinivas Iyengar, A.B. Purani, many others. Rishabh Chand, who have written on him, many others. Yes, anything else? Anybody? Yes, Malini.
Thank you. This was so enlightening. I wanted to ask you, when we think of decolonization today, in terms of a theory of change, right? Can you tell us a little more about how Sri Aurobindo looked at the modernity question itself? And what was
Well, I'll say one thing. I don't know, because it's a very involved question, which can't be, the response can't be in a sentence. I'll say one thing, that yesterday we were discussing colonial hangover in Professor Soumya's speech. And in the question of beef, he said that people of that time could be forgiven for the colonial hangover. I dare say Sri Aurobindo never suffered from it. His endorsement of the Stafford Cripps proposal did not come from a colonial hangover. It was a firm belief and a foreknowledge, a foresight of what independent India would encounter. In 1915, he and the mother had shared that India's freedom was assured And then they asked amongst themselves, the question is what India will do with her freedom. But again, a very interesting thing, I don't know how many of you know this. Dilip Kumar Roy has a book of songs, or two books, called Shuro Bihar. All right? In the first one on Shuro Bihar, towards the end, he has a letter. And Sri Aurobindo wrote a dance drama, a short dance drama. And it's called On Vande Mataram as a dance song. And it shows the entire trajectory of free India. If you read that half-pager today, you will realize that Sri Aurobindo knew what India would go through in 75 years, and more than that. So, if you actually read up, you can go back to his time. In fact, Kennedy is reported to have said that he didn't believe that Sri Aurobindo passed away in 1950, because he was accosted with certain articulations of his around in the early 60s, and this is what he replied. Because his words remain as valid as they were in 1900 today, not by stretching them and not by twisting and contorting them, verbatim. He's actually talked about Gundaism, hooliganism and things like that happening in independent India. Financial mismanagement, all this, corruption. How would he have known sitting in 1950? He passed away on 5th December, but he knew it. So it's interesting to go through what he has written, what he has said. Okay? Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes.
I did not invite Babuada because I call him Babuada, Ranjanda because he's a fellow Bengali. It's because I find very few who can articulate about Sri Aurobindo with the mind and the heart that is necessary. So it's been months that I proposed this to him, and I'm so glad you gave us this. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been entirely my honor and privilege.